Hey guys, this is Chef Lynn. Welcome back to Rainbow Gastronomy on the Left of Straight podcast. I'm very excited today to be here with my dear friend Jamie Mayne. Jamie's not only one of my oldest and dearest friends, but she was the one of the owners and the Fromager at Third and Vine in Jersey City when I was the chef there. She's currently living in California, and she runs a small business called Mayne Creations, where she does curated cheese offerings for clients and makes some delicious toffees and bacon salt and stuff like that. So, Jamie, it's great to have you here with me. Thanks so much for being on.
Hi, well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so how are you doing today?
Can't complain. It's a gorgeous day here in California.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so for the listeners who don't know, tell me what a fromager is.
To put it simply, a fromager is basically just somebody who might know a little more about cheese than you do. So these people tend to fall into their jobs by accident. At least I did. But a fromager will typically just know how to care for, cut, style, present, and talk about cheeses from around the world.
So you said you kind of fell into it. That's how you kind of became a cheese whiz, as I like to say. So tell me a little bit more about your background, like where you've worked and stuff like that.
I got my cheese. I started into cheese when I was living in San Francisco, and I was working at a fine dining restaurant, and the sommelier was kind of running out of enthusiasm to take care of the cheese program. So he just asked me to kind of step in, and I thought, this would be a good opportunity to learn more about cheese. I wasn't, so I kind of did the job for free, just for fun. That's kind of, these little series of accidental internships, I feel like. So I started doing that. And then when I moved to New York, I started working at a place called The Modern, and they have a cheese cart where you have to set up the cheese cart every day. And one of the front waiters will have to present the cheese courses for tables that order a cheese course. None of the cheeses have any labels on them. You have to just memorize what's on there, and it's a lot for your brain. So I started doing that, and I got pretty good at it to the point where the other front waiters would basically ask me to do the cheese courses for their tables. Okay. And then the fromager from there left and opened a beautiful place called Casa Lula in Midtown Manhattan, and I was kind of the second in command with the cheese there. I didn't do any ordering, but I learned a lot and I observed a lot. I went from having to memorize a cheese cart of 25 cheeses to a cheese menu of about 40.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. And that's where I started learning about cheese and condiment pairing, because that's what Casa Lula was famous for. And so I worked alongside the chef and the pastry chef and the executive fromager. So Tia Keenan was the first fromager of Casa Lula, and she was just absolutely brilliant with her pairings. And I learned a lot from her. And then I ended up leaving for about a year, and then I came back, and there was another fromager in charge, Dimitri Sade. And I learned, again, completely different style of cheese pairing, some of them I liked, some of them I really didn't like. We had very different palates. So, and then I ended up opening up my own place, Third and Vine, along with Brian Rothbart, my now ex-husband. He was a genius behind the bar and ran a really wonderful wine program. Obviously, we had you in the kitchen holding down the savory end of all things beautiful and pastry. And I latched onto the cheese program. And by then, I had enough cheese experience to know what I wanted on the menu, the pairings that I really liked. And I was taught by the owner of Casa Lula that basically if you start serving the kind of product that you are passionate about, that you love, that you want to eat, then the people who love what you love will find you.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, we had a great time there at Third and Vine, and the cheeseburger was amazing. We had, like 35 to 40 cheeses on the menu. That was always great. Talk to me a little bit about your process. Like, how did you choose the cheeses for the restaurant? How do you choose cheeses for a client? What goes into your pairings? Stuff like that.
Well, the pairings, that can be a whole nother episode in and of itself. I try to include, usually when I talk to somebody about what they want in a cheese plate, it's really figuring out exactly what they think they want and then giving them what they really want.
Okay.
So I like to ask a table if they're, how adventurous are you? Are you a beginner? Are you intermediate? Are you like, what's your preference? Do you like soft, hard, stinky, blue? Because in my opinion, I would like to have that full spectrum, a soft, a hard, a stinky, and a blue, at least. And then a fifth or sixth cheese to kind of like, balance it out somewhere. But, ascertain whether or not someone likes really sharp cheeses, or they like really mellow cheeses. And I mean, I don't judge too harshly as long as they're eating cheese. So, but as far as choosing cheeses from the menu, I like to make sure I include, I always want to represent all of the farm animals that are producing milk. So I always have some goat cheeses on the menu, and one of my goat, sheep, cow, and buffalo when possible. As far as choosing for clients when I'm doing my catering, that is a completely different ballgame, because when you're working at a restaurant, you're trying to create a unique food experience for each and every person who's ordering an individual plate. So you have this broad spectrum of condiments and cheeses to draw from. But when you're catering, it's a bit of it's different, because you're dealing with one client who may, want things that you don't necessarily love. But there's always, you can always find a happy medium, and sometimes change. One of my favorite things about the industry is being able to educate and change someone's mind on something that they thought they didn't like, or thought that they like. When people say, "Oh, I hate blue cheese," I'm like, well, if I gave you a little sample of something to try, would you try it? And just try to get people to maybe venture out. Like, have you tried blue cheese with, like your favorite, the Nutella, or
Yeah,
my favorite? I love the brown sugar fudge.
yeah. I like the balance of the sweet and savory of the savoriness of the blue cheese with the sweetness. Like when you introduced me to the blue cheese with Nutella, I thought, well, this is wild and way out of left field, and I don't think it's going to work, but it's absolutely amazing. And I share it with friends all the time, and they always love it. So that brought me into like we did from the kitchen the blue cheese creme brulee, and that stemmed from you doing brulee blue cheese at the cheese bar, and that was one of our best-selling desserts. That was one of the two that stayed on the menu the entire time. So, what you said that talking about pairings would be a whole nother episode, but can you give like maybe a short little bit about what goes into that? Like you're looking for what balance, like complementary flavors, obviously, or opposing flavors, or
Let me just take like a mildly stinky cheese, for instance. If you have somebody who wants to try a stinky cheese but they're a little nervous, you want to put maybe something sweet and crunchy with it. Sweet and the stinky can kind of balance each other out. If you want somebody who wants to really level out that stinky cheese, maybe put like some pickled fennel or something with a little brightness to it, to like cut the fat and kind of cut the stink, and kind of kind of convince your palate that it's a more well-rounded experience. Like you don't always want to do like a sweeter cheese with a sweeter cheese. But I've also loved the contradiction of like a red pepper jelly with goat cheese.
okay.
Like you have these kind of, I like the contradiction. It also really depends on what they're on, if they're if they're drinking red or white wine, if they're drinking sparkling wine. I mean, shoot, if they're drinking coffee, that's going to make a difference. If I have someone who wants, like going back to the stinky cheese thing, if someone's really nervous, I'll pick a stinker, then put it with like rosemary roasted pine nuts or candied pecans, something sweet and a little more gentle to kind of ease you into that cheese. If you want something that's more for the more of her fine palate, like I said, with something like more pickled. But if you want someone who wants to like exaggerate the stinkiness, I'd do something like roasted mushrooms. The addicts of that mushroom and the stink is going to really just take that to another level in your brain.
Yeah, that's something really interesting that I found too. Is like, and I think maybe you said this to me at one point. Like, I feel like a lot of people go cheese and they automatically are like, okay, well, I'm going to put some jams or some mustard with it. But we did so many other things at Third and Vine, and I'm sure you did at Casalula too, like pestos and things like that, that just made everything so much more interesting.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I also had the luxury of working in fine dining for 25 years. So that did help. And just to really spark the creativity of like, if you've got this one cheese that kind of reminds you of something you'd see on like a pizza. Think like, oh, what do you like on pizza? Oh, I like olives on pizza. Let me try an olive tamponade. Let me just try it, see if it works. And sometimes it works and sometimes it really doesn't. At the end of the day, it's a matter of just trying things and seeing how they work on your palate. And but yeah, I love the idea of doing pickled things with cheese. Not a lot of people will go there naturally. I really love the idea of like a bacon chutney or a tomato chutney. Those are all really fun. Mustards, if you can get fun mustards, like we used to make our own there at Third and Vine. That was really fun to like soak mustard seeds in vinegar and wine and some kind of sugar for like 24 hours and then emulsify it with a jam. You do all sorts of fun stuff.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. I hate when people ask me this, but a lot of people will ask me like, "What's my favorite thing to cook?" Like I like to cook or bake or whatever. So, what is your favorite cheese and maybe a pairing with it?
I have what I like to call my desert island cheese. She's a sassy little number called Mimolette. She's kind of a bowling ball shape. She's about that big. She's like a small bowling ball or cannon. And she's bright orange. She hails from Normandy, France, and I like to call her a better cheddar.
Okay.
So legend has it that apparently at some point in time when Normandy and Holland weren't necessarily trading goods, that the French really missed their Gouda or Gouda, as they say it in, where it's from. So they tried mimicking Gouda in Normandy, and they ended up aging this cheese that it's like if an aged Gouda and a aged cheddar had a magical baby. And it's aged in these and it was actually banned from the United States for about 6 years because it was our super fun FDA found out that it was aged in caves that were infested with dust mites, and that's how the outside of this cheese ends up having these little holes in the outside. Kind of makes it look like the surface of the moon. It's got like all these little craters. And so they banned it from the United States for 6 years until I don't know exactly what happened. I didn't follow it during that time, but they finally realized that if they tried banning us from dust mites, they'd have to ban us from like our couches.
Sure.
And all the dust mites are completely gone by the time they get here. You can't see them anyway. It's just one of the ways that this cheese aerates and actually ages faster than if you were to put a wax rind on like a Gouda.
Interesting.
And one of my favorite pairings with that, I think my favorite that I ever had, we made a pineapple mostarda. Do you remember? Yeah, I think we made that one at Third, because I know we also had it at Casalula. So I'm trying to, those times all kind of, some of the condiments kind of mushed together in my brain because I've made them over the years in different places. But like a pineapple mostarda with the Mimolette is probably my all-time favorite pairing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I love Mimolette as well, and I've done it here when I've done like some parties here, just like for with friends and stuff. But I like to do it with like I call them candied jalapenos. They're kind of, so you cook them in like a vinegar, but with a lot of sugar too. So they're like sweet and sour, and the spicy obviously because they're jalapenos. It's really good with the Mimolette too. So
Fun.
yeah. So why don't you tell me a little bit about Mayne Creations, like what you do and some of the stuff that you sell? Because I know you do like a holiday time, you do your toffees, which you do like all kinds of nut toffees and stuff like that. So tell me a little bit about that.
So Mayne Creations at the moment, the actual, so I do specialized catering sometimes by request. It all started when I had this wonderful lady that was a regular of ours at Third and Vine, Alicia. She made me pinky swear to make her a wedding cake out of cheese. And so I pinky swore, and I didn't think she'd remember. And then 7 months later, I get a save the date email along with an email saying, "Hey, we're going to make that cake, right?" And I was like, no, I have to figure out how to do it. So as with a lot of jobs I've had in my life, I just kind of say, sure, yes, I can do that. And then I figure it out. So I figured out how to make this wedding cake out of cheese. And it was absolutely stunning, and it was fun. And then people would ask me to just do various things, and I would figure out how to do it. And so what Mayne Creations looks like today, because I did move to California from New York after we sold Third and Vine, moved out here, and I kind of put it to sleep for a while. And then I started just kind of catering by request. We had a local theater company that needed their gala saved because they didn't have a caterer for their opening night. So I was like, well, this is something I used to do. And I showed them some pictures, and they're like, okay. And they trusted me to do it. And I pulled it out. It was so much fun. And then every once in a while, someone will ask me to do a job. I will purchase the cheeses for that at wholesale, because I do have a wholesale account out here in California with my favorite company. And I'll purchase enough cheese I'll purchase enough cheese for that event, but it's usually has about, 3 parties worth of cheese. And so then I'll just kind of put a flash advertisement out on Facebook, Instagram, and tell people, say, hey, I've got enough cheese to do 1 more party this month, or 2 more parties this month, or I have availability for this. And then I'll get calls from friends of friends or strangers, and I'll kind of, this is what I have to offer right now. Do you want it or not? And so the first person who gets me gets to pick all their cheeses. And then this is what I offer. And it's been fun, and I've made some new friends. And so that is that's kind of once every 5-6 weeks, I get like a little blast. But the other thing that I do the most consistent has been the bacon salt.
Okay.
I send that all over the country. And that happened because I had bacon salt from a place in New York called the Bakery. It went out of business in 2020, like a lot of things did. And then I ran out. And so I Googled and I looked and I tried to find it, and I could not find bacon salt that would satisfy the needs that I had. So I figured out how to make it. And then I posted about making it, and then all my friends and family were like, ooh, I want to buy that. So that I have year round. I bulk because it is shelf stable, because I had one person ask me for the recipe because she's like, oh, I'll just do it myself. And I was like, sure. I gave it to her. It's a 4-day process, and it involves a dehydrator.
Oh, so yeah.
Nobody wants to do that. So you make it once, and I've got a customer for life, I feel like. And then the other thing was our family's always called it almond roca. It's essentially a toffee. It's a recipe that was my grandmother's neighbors up in Tahoe, and my grandma adapted it for high altitude. And it was our first dessert off the menu at Casalula. We had our first opening day, and desserts hadn't come to fruition yet. So we were just doing our little test day of people just coming in, and that's when we had our little powwow at the end of the night. And Brian was like, do you remember that? Do you know how to do that toffee recipe? And I was like, yeah. She's like, can you just like make some so we have some kind of dessert tomorrow? And I was like, sure. And then we put it on the menu, and then it came off the menu. It just became a little specialty thing people would get. And then people started buying it from me in bulk for Christmas. And it wasn't because I didn't push it or go for it. People just were asking for it. So I was like, oh, I guess this is now a side business. And when we sold the restaurant, I made like 12 or 13 batches of it. So I had buckets of this toffee in my office in New Jersey. And and this was after we sold the bar, and I'd get calls, text messages like, oh, do you have this? Because I started making it from different nuts and different chocolates. So I'd have pecan, hazelnut, cashew, almonds, whatever people wanted, I would just figure it out and make it. And so people would call, text, and be like, oh, I want this much, I want that much. I had a scale in my apartment, and I'd be weighing it out in Ziploc bags, and I really felt like a drug dealer. I was like, when did I become a drug dealer? So that was probably the most amusing time of my toffee selling business. And then I moved to California, and again, Christmas time came around, and my regular customers started hounding me, and I was like, oh shoot, I guess I can ship things to other states. That I unfortunately I can only make the toffee between about October and April.
Okay.
It's just the heat and humidity doesn't do me any favors out here. And if I have a lot of orders to do, I actually take a few days and drive up to Tahoe where my parents live, because the high altitude and cold up there really works well. But in the summertime, I just literally can't make it. Humidity, I actually have a humidity monitor in my kitchen just so that I know on days that I can make it and days that I can't.
All right. So, cheese and charcuterie have gotten really popular over the last couple of years. So the last thing I want to ask you is, can you give me 3 cheese and condiment pairings for like the newbie cheese guy, and then maybe 3 for the more advanced or adventurous cheese lover?
Yes. I've been thinking about this question. I struggle because different places have different cheeses. But if I were to get real, like super basic about it, for your, for your beginner, like a soft hard and a blue. I mean, I like to include a blue always, because even if people are a little bit timid, if you put the right thing with it, it's usually palatable, and you can find a way to enjoy it your own way. I would usually start with some sort of a softer cheese, like something basic, like like a brie or camembert, or even a triple cream. A triple cream is over 75% butter fat, so it's pretty much like eating butter with a rind. It's very gentle, it's very mellow, it's very rich. People just adore it. And you can put something very simple with that, like lemon curd or a candied nut or seed. Like a candied pumpkin seeds are really fun, like little candied pepitas. That's a really gentle pairing, and the texture is really fun with a soft and soft cheese with a crunchy thing like that. You could do something in, like, say, the harder family, like a Gouda or a cheddar, just to keep it super simple and basic. And your cheddars can be anywhere from, you can have very mellow American cheddars all the way to your super harsh, rustic, earthy British cheddars. And then your Goudas that can, again, be like super little, soft baby Gouda up to like your 7-year Stompertoren. But do something like that with, let's say, a very simple, like a simple chutney, or like a bacon chutney. That's not simple, but like a bacon chutney is fun. Or even like a whole grain mustard type of idea, because the mustard will balance out the richness of the cheese. And then to do like a blue with something very easy to find, like your Nutella. And I'm a big fan of sheep's milk blue cheeses, because they tend to be high. They are higher in fat, so they tend to be richer, and that's just where they tend to go. They, of course, you're going to have all cheeses all over the place, but and then for your more adventurous cheese palette, if you can ever get your hands on it, my favorite soft cheese is a cheese called Bleu d'Argental. Sounds very fancy, but when you actually break it down in French, it just means the red cow from Argental. So vache rousse, vache meaning cow, rousse meaning red. Whole Foods will sometimes have it. You can find it at specialty markets. I want to say that it is easier to find than other really esoteric cheeses, but yeah, Brebis Rousse is one of my favorites. A sheep's milk brie type style with it has a red rind because it's colored with annatto seed. I like to do that with like a candied pecan. I like that one with nutty things, honestly. Again, with the pumpkin seeds, or like a jam. You can find like a heartier jam, like a persimmon jam, or like a pomegranate. That really stands up well because it's a very, very rich camembert. And then for like a harder cheese, if you want to really go crazy, there's some really fun like aged Goudas out there. The mimolette is also, obviously, that would be a really good spot for that. That would be extra fun with like a funky pesto. I started making an arugula pesto here in California, and it gets along really well with those types of cheeses. So like a mimolette, or if you can find a 5 to 7 year Gouda, that's always kind of fun. If you're not into like a harder cheese like that, if you want to do like a stinky cheese, I want to say, I don't think you can find stinking bishop out here. I know I can, because I can find stinking bishop anywhere, but there's a lot of really amazing wash drying cheeses that you can get. Usually you want to find some of those, a little more domestic. You can find some really great cheeses from like Dancing Fern Creamery makes some really beautiful ones. Also, Zimbro is another favorite. That's a Portuguese sheep's milk cheese. That is, it's wrapped in like a bandage, and it's aged, and you cut the top off, you scoop it out. That's really fun. And then it's not for the faint of heart. I remember we had it on our stinker sandwich, our stinky sandwich, for a long time, and that was just outstanding. So to do something like that with like roasted mushrooms or pickled fennel is really, that's one of my favorite all-time pairings. And then if you did want to go for a blue cheese for the more adventurous, if you're up for making or finding a brown sugar fudge to do with something like, one of my favorite is a Crozer Bleu from Ireland. That is a really intense, sheepy, barnyardy, funky blue cheese, but that is amazing with, you can also do that with very simple chocolate. The brown sugar fudge, if you're feeling like you want to, if you want to make fudge, or any fudge you can find really, or you can also do like a chocolate bark with sea salt is really fun. I like to balance out I like to do like chocolatey, salty, sweet savory with blue cheeses.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I like that you mentioned the Stinking Bishop because that was like my favorite one that we had on the Third and Vine. I loved that cheese.
My favorite part about the Stinking Bishop, well, because I've served it at Casalula where people would get it and they would order it on purpose. And I mean, it's called the Stinking Bishop. So, I mean, and I had one table that they called me over and they just insisted that there was something wrong with the cheese. There was something bad. And I'm like, I went back and I tasted the wheel and I was like, that's how it's supposed to taste. And they insisted. And so, we took it off their check because my boss, that was kind of his policy. But when I had it on my menu, I had it with a little asterisk at the end that said no backsies. So, but it was fun to do stuff like that on my menu because I was like, hey. And if people ordered it, I would, because when you're working as a fromager, you're often working with a server or multiple servers who are responsible for gathering the information and then relaying it to you, and then you guessing what that means and then giving it to the customer. So it is like a game of telephone. So it really makes a difference who you're working with. But whenever someone would order the Stinking Bishop, every single time, unless it was a certain server, I would always go to that table and be like, okay, do you understand that this is like the stinkiest cheese I've ever had? So no backsies is for real. They're like, no, we have to try it. So I just like to make sure people know what they're getting themselves into when they go for it.
So. Cool. So, well, thanks so much for being with me today, Jamie. It's been great chatting with you. Do you want to tell everybody like where they can find you if they want to order maybe your bacon salt or something?
Yeah. I do have a Facebook page for Mayne Creations, and it's Mayne Creations. You can find me there. My name is Jamie Mayne, JamieMayne. You can find me on Facebook. I think I'm the only one that lives in a town called Copperopolis.
Okay.
So it's an old copper mining town. We live on the lake here. I take care of my grandma. And so, yeah, Copperopolis, Jamie Mayne. You can find me, message me on Facebook. You can always, get in touch with Lynn, message Lynn. And if you pass the test, he'll give you my phone number. I also am on Instagram. On Instagram, it's Mayne Creations ETC. Because when I originally had it in New Jersey, it was Mayne Creations, etc. So it's Mayne Creations ETC, and I still have that active Instagram account. You can message me there. But yeah, Facebook is usually the best bet, and you can always find me, send me a message, and yeah.
Great. Well, thanks again, Jamie. All right, guys. So thanks for joining me today on this episode of Rainbow Gastronomy. As always, you can find me across all social media at Chef Lynn Wheeler. My website is cheflynnwheeler.com. And please go to my YouTube channel, Getting Saucy with Chef Lynn. All right. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, guys.